In just a few short hours, I'm headed to the airport to hop on a plane and report to Dolphins 2025 training camp. What am I looking for in my time there? I'm glad you asked. That's here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, an NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Excited. It's report date, not just for the Dolphins, but for me. I'm headed down to training camp a couple hours. It's about 5 a.m. And just figured this would be a good one to kind of set the table. It's not time sensitive. There's no way the football gods are going to blow up my show as I'm driving to the airport because I did something topical and then a transaction happens, right? And it kind of throws the show for a curveball, and then I'm mad in the flight the whole way down. So want to get into the things that I'm looking for training camp in 2025 for the Dolphins. And I think there's some things that it's going to be too early for. Like, I would love to walk away and say, hey, I think there's going to be this transition from outside zone focus to maybe a little bit more inside zone, running duo, the LA Rams run game evolution. I don't think we're going to get that. No, I think it's going to be too early until you start watching, okay, how are they calling preseason games, right? How does the competition at several spots unfold? So I think there's going to be certain things that it's too easy for, but there's a lot of matchups, individual player matchups that I'm going to have my eyes on. And then there's a lot of little things that I think have the chance to, when you stack them all up, you add up your margins on where you're getting your net gains and losses versus the rest of the league. I think those are the kinds of places, and we'll get into some of what those specifics are, that I think the Dolphins need to have in training camp to be different than what they were last season, if the Dolphins are going to have a more successful campaign than what they had. Some of the things I think it's too early for. I don't think you're going to get any clarity on schematics, especially in the first week of install, right? It's oftentimes this exploratory process of this is what our offseason objectives were. This is what we think we can be. But then how, when you put it in, how do they execute it? How do they execute it versus this front and this look? And sometimes you end up not with the same picture when you play that first game than what you anticipated you were going to have throughout the summertime. And I think that was painfully relevant last year for the Dolphins with who they thought and wanted to be offensively based on versus what they could be with their personnel. So I'm not going to get on here on Thursday or Friday and talk about, get a lot of clarity on what this run get, right? There's going to be install days where the defense is going to, by design, have a disadvantage with their calls and the calls that they're working against the offense, and vice versa, right? I don't think training camp is the place to live with the highs and the lows in any given point in time. And the good news is, for a lot of the key players at key spots on this roster, you kind of know what the players are. Not all the spots. Cornerback is a massive question, but if you're going to live with, hey, the defense had a great day, or hey, the defense had a horrible day, and the Dolphins passing game hit a bunch of explosive plays and these guys didn't cover your receivers, it's what's the coverage? How are they willingly leaving these guys on islands? is that how they're going to play in the season? Right. So I think for me, that's the big one for me going in, is to not be a prisoner of the moment for good or bad for either side of the ball, because sometimes it's just an install of, hey, we want to work on 5-man pressure looks. So we're going to bring 5 and we're not going to have 2 high safeties up, and we're going to leave these guys on island and man-to-man coverage and see who grows up. Right. And if nobody grows up, then you kind of have your answer for that day. But if you're going to a real-time game situation, the conversation is like, okay, do we have any matchups that we can strategically scheme up with the protection front to get after protection where we don't have to bring 5 and we can keep the extra name in, or keep the extra hat in on the back end to help prevent those explosive plays? Like, it's different game planning for an opponent versus we want to put you in negative leverage situations and see how you handle it. And in a perfect world, those guys would grow up in real time and they would have those negative leverage situations and still perform at a high level. But I don't think I'm going to get a feel for the DNA of this team in such a quick amount of time from an X's and O's perspective. And I don't think it's appropriate to live and die by the completion percentage of the quarterback, or how many drops the receivers have, or how many touchdowns the defense gave up in the red zone period on Friday, right? Like, that to me, I think is missing the foundational observations that you can make without being results oriented in the first week of training camp. So that's my number one objective, is to not be a prisoner of the result of any given play, because you don't know how they scripted practice to run. But the structure of practice, the flow of practice, the intensity of practice. I've been coming down to the Dolphins training camp for 5 years now. This will be year number 6. That I've got a pretty good litmus test on. We'll talk about that with the little things, in addition to some matchups that I am watching when these guys have a chance for O-line, D-line, and wide receiver DB 101s. Some really interesting opportunities there. We're going to get into that next. Make sure you guys stick with us. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra, Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them for yourself. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to get Regeet Ready. Regeet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Regeet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you could stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked for you, Regeet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch, and it's completely online. Regeet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your front door. Head to Regeet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. And use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturer review. Please visit the Regeet website for full safety information. Matchups. I'll pull the depth chart here. Can I have my handy dandy 2 deep for practice tomorrow? I absolutely will be watching how grown up and how fast Patrick Paul looks, because he will have opportunities to protect. You're not going to hit the quarterback in a training camp environment, and I understand that. But early losses are bad losses, right? And early losses, when they happen, as compared to, well, he's engaged and he kind of has him framed, but the quarterback moves off his spot. And would he have got the quarterback when he was, engaged with the offensive lineman? No. How are you framing? How are you working in space? If you guys are subscribers to Touchdown Miami on Substack, last 2 weeks I've done Austin Jackson content, deep dive. I did 40 minutes on Austin Jackson in 3rd and 6+ pass protection the other day. And it's a film review, and we work through every 3rd and 6 pass protection opportunity that Patrick Paul had, or excuse me, that Austin Jackson had with Tua Tagovailoa playing quarterback in 2024. So very enlightening film review of how those individual opportunities to block were handled from a framing perspective, a footwork perspective, a timing perspective. Everything up until the point of first contact is the foundational stuff that's going to determine and realistically dictate whether or not you have a successful rep. And for Patrick Paul, congrats. You got Jalen Phillips back. You got Bradley Chubb back. You got Chop Robinson. First team defense, you're going to have talented guys to block. So I want to know how Patrick Paul handles those situations from a framing perspective, from a footwork perspective, from a timing of his hands perspective. I'm not going to read too much into whether or not he gives up a guy turning the corner on an extended player, the quarterback continuing to hold the ball in the pocket and work through his progressions and make it right. It's your process of how you're handling every rep. It's a huge player for the Dolphins, Patrick Paul. The Jonah Savaitanaya versus Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips, like the rookie battle inside. Obviously, it's a couple of rookies, so like your litmus test of how refined the reps are is a little open to interpretation, but those should be some really fun battles as far as that's the meat of this Dolphins draft class, figuratively and literally. And that is how you chose to address the tonality, to use the phrasing that the Dolphins have used, the tonality of the football team. We want big, exceptionally explosive, exceptionally powerful trench players on either side of the ball to help us change who we are on the line of scrimmage. That's everyone's number one complaint about the Dolphins. Is they're too soft up front. They're not overly physical. And he drafted these guys with their first 3 picks. If they're right on all of them, obviously is a game-changing proposition. How early can you determine you're right on all of them if you are? Well, these guys have a chance to work on each other, and those matchups, I think, should be a lot of fun. I don't think they'll be the most enlightening for who is ready to contribute at a high level right away, at least not early, but nevertheless, man, that should be some fireworks. So I'm looking forward to that interior O-line, D-line trench battle that we should be expecting as well. Darren Waller, very firmly going to have my attention. In addition to, I should say, the new skill players. I know what Jalen Waddle can do. I believe Jalen Waddle's been underutilized the last couple of years from a primary progression standpoint. Is that funny that exact same Austin Jackson reel that we did with all those 3rd and 6s? You know what was the most consistent presence? Jalen Waddle running outs to the boundary and getting a expletive ton of separation, regardless whether he's inside releasing, outside releasing. Sometimes he'll inside release, stack a guy vertically, even though the guy's got outside leverage on him, and still win the out route and still create several yards of separation. I know who Jalen Waddle is. I know who Tyreek Hill is. Malik Washington, I think I can watch with the eye towards, do I feel like you made a big jump? But Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, Darren Waller, Pharaoh Brown, those guys, I want to see how these guys move. I want to see how they take angles in space. I want to see how they pick up blocks on the perimeter when they're flexed or as an inline player and you got to get up onto the second level, right? Like, that's where the Dolphins were so hurt. And these are the names that have been tapped into answering the question. So offensively, right, you've got starting new guards, kind of remade tight end room, backup quarterback situations, whole brand new. Thank goodness. But it's ancillary players, right? And how do they those new players with reduced touching the ball roles are going to have a hand in the identity of the offense as the preseason and training camp unfolds itself. That's very interesting and compelling to watch. In my mind, it is. So I will be watching closely. On the defensive side of the ball, it's all about this defensive back group. I think I've got a lot of confidence in what the front seven looks like, that it's going to be a highly competitive and impactful group so long as they are healthy. Got to throw that disclaimer in there. But Cam Smith, Jason Marshall, Storm Duck, Isaiah Johnson, Ethan Bonner, BJ Adams. I know who Artie Burns is. I think Artie Burns should have a strong argument to make the roster as what would ideally be a fourth corner. Special teams, veteran guy, can get you through a game if somebody gets banged up, played a lot of meaningful football, first-round pedigree, just an older guy that hasn't played a lot. There's a role on this offense for Artie Burns, and he knows the scheme because he played in it last year. But I need somebody else to step up so that Artie Burns isn't tabbed as one of the starting corners on this football team, because that, I don't think, is a sustainable 17-game answer for you. You might get a couple games out of it. Who, especially knowing that Tyreek Hill is coming in lighter and in an effort to be more explosive, and Jalen Waddle, who covers those guys? Right? And it's not, wow, the Dolphins are screwed because Ethan Bonner couldn't cover him. But who shows the ability and the technique and the foot transitions and the anticipation of the route? Who shows those things to have good process for plays, even if the result is not good at times? That, for me, is one of the defining variables of my time in training camp. We got to know. We got to know who's ready to roll. And if we get down and the Dolphins up their offer to somebody after 2 days of camp, they didn't like their answer, right? So I think the timing on that regard will be very interesting as well. The little things, the structure of practice, the flow of practice, how the guys, what time are you on the field? We're going to get into that next here on Locked on Dolphins. So make sure that you guys stick with us. This is an ad by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us can't quit our jobs and take endless vacations, but we can start small, whether that's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement to your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. Therapy can help you set healthier boundaries at work so stress doesn't spill over into the rest of your life. It's a big problem for me working from home, right? Is those boundaries are very difficult at times when everything kind of exists in the same place. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt on the beach. You could use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups. The app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch high-stakes event. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are part of the action. If you like NFL futures bets, the Dolphins are plus 750 to win the AFC East. If you think the Bills are going to win, you're not going to find very favorable odds there. It's minus 280 for Buffalo, so overwhelmingly favored. But you do have some good odds over in the NFC North between the Green Bay Packers at plus 260 and the Vikings at plus 270. There's some compelling action for divisional futures bets over there in the NFC North that at least have my attention. So you, if you're new to FanDuel, can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. The little things. What time is everybody out there for practice? Obviously, they're going to blow the horn. Everybody's going to run out. Does anybody get like the special treatment? Oh, take your time. Come out whenever you're ready. We've got we got special teams first, so you don't need to be out there. I want to know. I'm going to do the head count, right? Keep in mind, the Dolphins of course, have the near field, the far field, and then the indoor field. When they run out to the near field to do stretch, I'm going to be watching. Is anybody running out from the indoor field late? These are the kinds of things that this team's talked about all offseason since the moment that exit interviews came along. So I want to know, is everybody coming out at the same time? And if you're not, then the question I would hope will be asked at some point, if that's the case, what is the schedule for so-and-so that they do not come out with the rest of the team, right? Because you have a chance to get there beforehand and do your rehab or your taping or your individual stretch, whatever your individual routine is. I want to know who's staying on the field after practice, who's getting more work in after practice. And obviously, you have other stuff to do. It's not just as simple as, oh, well, we're done for the day, so I'm going to sit out here and bust my butt for another hour. I'm not foolish enough to know that would be how the schedule works. But some guys are quick to run in. Some guys are quick to follow through on something that came up during practice. How intense are the practices? How competitive is the nature of the practices? Was it Washington last year? Kind of came in, and I remember the feedback being, well, the Dolphins, they wrapped practice and jogged inside, and the Commanders ran sprints. Well, one of those teams won 12 games and went to the NFC Championship game last year. And the Dolphins don't play in the NFC, so it wasn't them. So what's the conditioning look like? And the Dolphins have historically kind of had this sports science ideal approach for how they handle workloads and GPS tracking and all that. And I'm interested to see if there's anything that's changed with all of that implementation for training camp this year. So that's something that may come up in questions to Mike McDaniel. And how intensely competitive are you putting guys out there? How intensely competitive are the windows in which you are battling with one another? Is everybody coming out when they're supposed to come out? Is anybody looking to do more work on the back end? These are the kinds of things that if you stack it up throughout the season, right, instead of just, well, we're not going to work you long, but we're going to work you hard for the defined amount of time that we have. We already know they pushed the start of practice up. It's early, 9 a.m. practice start. Are you doing that to get out of the heat so you can be more competitive? I hope so. Those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be looking for at training camp this week for the Miami Dolphins. So what I hear, we'll be down there for the next couple of days. And then obviously we'll recap when I am back a lot of these talking points. So you have that to look forward to. Next couple of days, I will not be in my regular recording studio. I'll be in a hotel in Miramar and set up and ready for Dolphins practice. It is Dolphins training camp report date. It's also Kyle Crabb's training camp report date. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Crabbs, keep it locked in here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as well for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.